Okay, welcome back to members of 121 Community Church in Grapevine, Texas, in our ongoing study in the Meno by Plato. And we're using the complete works of Plato, translated by Benjamin Jowett. And we're going to look at pages 100 to 125, and we're going to look at the original manuscript of the Meno. Let's go to block 1. Let's go to block 1, and we take a look at the ever-reborn soul. Plato said the soul is immortal. It has been born many times and sees all that exists. Therefore, virtue may be called to remembrance. Anamnesis, remember? Anamnesis. Plato believed in and taught that the soul is ever reborn. Therefore, virtue may be called to remembrance. All learning is recollection. But Plato said, but I'm not entirely confident in this assertion. Fairly confident, but not entirely confident. But then he says, is virtue really knowledge, or is it another species? Virtue as a quality of the soul. He says virtue is good, and the goods of the soul include justice, courage, apprehension, and memory, and the soul endures under the guidance of wisdom. Therefore, it's better to say that virtue is a quality of the soul, coupled with wisdom. Virtue is a quality of the soul, coupled with wisdom. But he brings up that calling to remembrance at the very beginning of the Meno. And then in block 2, we take a look at two critical concepts for Plato: Episteme and Phronesis. So, episteme, virtue is always partly wisdom, at least, as episteme, and that is a system of understanding, a system of ideas, a system of eidos, ideas. And they guide our right action. They guide our ethical action. And this could be something that could be taught. Now, phronesis is practical wisdom or practical virtue. It is an abiding knowledge that becomes fruitful. And he says, in a way, it is linked to doxa from dokeo, true opinion. We are informed and guided in our ethical dialectic of the self through practical wisdom, phronesis. And so, block 3 pulls this all together in the concept of knowledge. He pulls it all together in the concept of knowledge, which closes out the dialogue of the Meno. Gnosis, knowledge is right opinion, doxa. Now remember, he's using doxa as a derivative of dokeo, to suppose. It's right opinion bound by recollection, fastened by a chain of ideas, episteme. Therefore, doxa plus episteme equals gnosis. There's his equation. Right opinion plus a chain of ideas equals gnosis. And that becomes a prophetic type of guidance. And it's received as a gift of God. So it's more instinctive, it's more intuitive. It's a gift of God. It's not something that man can ascend to. It is something given by God through that spark within the self that communicates with the mind of God. So this right opinion is guided by a chain of ideas, episteme, and when right opinion is guided by eidos, ideas, then we can form true conceptual gnosis to guide in the same way that the prophetic word would guide our ethical action. But it's a type of knowledge that abides in us because it is never purely theoretical It is practical. Phronesis is essential to Plato's idea here. We are always going out of the self and positing the self in the external world, and then through that interaction, that dialectical interaction in the outer world, then we refine right opinion, and then we return to the self inward, and coupled with that chain of ideas, we further refine right opinion and form true gnosis. We reach true conceptual eidos ideas. But it is ultimately it is an equation. Doxa, and that is doxa as a derivative of dokeo, opinion. Right opinion plus episteme, chain of ideas, equals gnosis. So it's a very important, very brief dialogue. It's a very brief dialogue, but it really does address the doctrine of ideas in a very powerful way. And that's really why I wanted to start with the Meno dialogue, because as we learned in the introduction, it is all about the doctrine of ideas, the doctrine of forms, the doctrine of eidos ideas as the universals that we use to inform our historical reality. And we appropriate those, we learn here, as a gift of God, as that which is acquired dialectically through phronesis, practical wisdom. It isn't a purely theoretical learning. You can't just simply be taught the eidos ideas. You cannot be simply taught how to be virtuous. You have to work through it dialectically in what Plato calls phronesis, practical wisdom. We acquire practical wisdom by working through the acquisition of the world of forms, the eidos ideas. And that's critical. It's not purely theory for Plato. It's theory plus phronesis. And it is a system of ideas, or what he calls a chain of ideas. He calls it a chain, but it is a system of understanding, a chain of ideas. That's why we can call it episteme. And we recall that chain of ideas because we are united with the mind of God. We have that spark of the divine within us. And so we are united through the image of God in us, and we can recollect that chain of ideas. But that recollection is coupled with practical wisdom. You have to go out into the world and learn the associations in order to extract the universals, and then return back to the self and the memory of the chain of ideas, and then back and forth dialectically again, and again to further refine that episteme, that system of understanding, that system of ideas. So it's always theoretical, it's always theoria plus phronesis. For Plato, it is theoria plus phronesis, always. For him, the doctrine of ideas is theoria plus phronesis, doxa plus episteme, to bring about true gnosis. So, very valuable to look at this actual original document. The introduction got us started, the last lesson got us started into the dialogue of the Meno, but this is the heart of the original document. First of all, the soul is ever reborn. So he begins by telling us that the soul is involved in a metaphysical dialectic, as we are on the earthly plane involved in a historical dialectic. The soul is always ever reborn. That is foundational to his doctrine of ideas. And then it is based on the concepts of episteme, which is theoretical, and phronesis, which is practical. The theoretical and the practical must be wedded together in Plato's thought. So the soul is ever reborn, and the doctrine of ideas involves theoretical episteme and practical phronesis. They are dialectically related to each other. So block 2 is the dialectical relationship between episteme and phronesis. And then we reach gnosis. Genuine gnosis as gift of God, not something that we can acquire on our own or even through teaching, but as a gift of the Spirit of the living God. Beautiful look at the original document. Brief document, but very good for understanding the doctrine of ideas. That's going to wrap up 100 to 125, the Meno. And I believe that what we're going to do next time is probably go to the Creto, page 55 to 72. Not very long, but we'll take a look at the Creto as our next venture in the complete works of Plato. That's going to wrap up the Meno, pages 100 to 125.